Welcome to the Founder and Force Multiplier podcast, where we explore how leaders work together with their right-hand partners to turn ideas into action and build wildly successful businesses. Today, we are excited to host the founders of A Leadership Beyond, Tom Rosenak and Adrienne Guerrero. Their story is fascinating. Tom is the founder of a company called Diamond Mind, and Adrienne of a company called Positive Delta. Their chance meeting at a networking event elevated into a partnership where they found their companies to be synergistic and created a powerful force in A Leadership Beyond. All right, Tom Rosenak and Adrienne Guerrero, thank you so much for being on the Founder and the Force Multiplier podcast.
Thanks for having us.
Yes, so excited to have you here. The universe somehow brought us together through LinkedIn. And I was on your podcast a few weeks ago, which was such a blessing and such a great conversation. We have connected in various ways, from thought leadership to what's happening in industries today. And I'm excited for everyone to hear our conversation and really understand what you do, how you do it, and what your partnership brings to the table. To kick us off, Tom and then Adrienne, or vice versa, can you guys give us a little bit about your personal bios so our audience knows who Tom and Adrienne are?
Well, Adrienne, you kick us off, please.
Okay. Well, Adrienne Guerrero, I am a serial corporate professional, I guess, in the HR space that freed myself of that in 2018 to start my own consulting practice. I spent most of that time in corporate working for very large enterprise companies. And I was in the HR space doing talent development and eventually got into this thing called change management, which was kind of unknown when I got into it. And I fell in love with it because the passion that I realized I had was helping the world just be a better place to work, focusing on people and the environment that we get to work in every day. How do we make that better? How do we sync that up with the personal styles and preferences of individuals and employees, and knowing how that all comes full circle? Engaged employees are giving the right things to the company that brings those business results. And so now that's what I spend my time doing as a solo practitioner. Still focusing on change management, but always focused on people and how do we optimize that.
Wow, that's awesome. And what timing, huh? Right before the pandemic.
Yeah.
Now we're pivoting into, sort of a recession. And so, yeah, you've been quite challenged. Great time.
Yeah, I wouldn't have planned it that way. That's for sure.
I'm Tom Rosenak, and I assure you, I am enthusiastic, even though my voice is hoarse, have a little laryngitis, but I'm not sick. And Manal offered to reschedule, which was gracious, but I'm so excited to be here. We'll push through. Diamond Mind Enterprises is my company, and I was doing persuasive arts in the corporate environment since 1995. And I started realizing a correlation. It's based on acres of diamond, and the idea is that we all have untapped inner resources. And it's our responsibility to connect to those and to express them in the world. So Diamond Mind Enterprise is still about the two sides of the same coin, becoming the person you want to become and expressing it in a way that invites other people to join along in the adventure. And that's called leadership.
Wow. I mean, even with your laryngitis, I felt the passion. So I'm excited. And I know everybody else here is going to be excited as well. It's so important when we blend sort of the, I would say, traditional, what business leadership means, and then going deeper into our core and human behavior and really studying the impacts and how that makes us make decisions and deal with change and grow individually, personally, and professionally. So I love that, Tom. It's always an inspiration to listen to you guys. So now everybody's kind of scratching their heads. So Adrienne, you've had a path. Tom, you've had a different path. Now, how exactly did these paths cross? Kind of tell us the story about how you met. And really, this is another example of fostering strategic partnerships to create
Yes.
a greater impact than on your own. And so I'd love to hear the story.
Yeah. Why don't I start, Tom, and you can add so we can save your voice.
Go for it.
So I would say that the common denominator for Tom and I is our focus on people. And what brought us together was a community that we had both joined, a community of consultants. So that's how we met. But quickly we realized that we had this common ground of truly, genuinely focusing on people to drive business results. And I was focused on these very large scale global programs, and Tom was focused on the individual. And so what we realized was I come in and focus on these big programs, and often with change initiatives, what are we missing? The focus on people, right? And so guess what? They aren't as successful as you hope they are. And so then Tom would find himself coming in on the backside of that and providing his services at an individual level to help to recover and really get that change to stick, right? And so putting the two of those things together, we said, hey, we've got from the beginning to the end if we work together.
Wow.
So we went after an initiative, a change management initiative that was also perfectly well-timed right ahead of COVID. And so that fell through, but we decided, hey, let's still work together and try to do something together. What could that be? This was right around the beginning of the pandemic, I would say. So we decided to create a lunch and learn series called Leadership Beyond Pandemic, the focus being around leadership and what are the competencies that we need now? What do we need to amp up now, knowing we're in a pandemic? And then how do we keep those things? What are those key competencies that we're discovering we need to tap into right now to carry forward? Because realizing it's always still about people. And what we were seeing with the pandemic was we were amping up what? Those soft skills, right? We were amping up the empathy. We were amping up sympathy, trust, those kind, and we realized those are things that are just good, solid leadership skills that really should continue. So from that, we created a community that we've now been building for the last, over a year. We were just talking about this, that we think we've hit probably some milestones we might have missed celebrating, but and we've got our community now called A Leadership Beyond. So we dropped the pandemic because we realized that this should just keep going. So it's A Leadership Beyond wherever you want to take it.
Wow.
Tom, what would you add?
Well, I think you hit it really well. I would only say I met Adrienne in a networking group, and I knew right away that I wanted to work with her.
Oh, that's
and
awesome.
We just didn't know how. And our first attempt, as Adrienne mentioned, was a client who had a need that was more in her ballpark than mine, but we were all in together. And then pandemic hit. And I just want to add that the first thing before complementary skills is complementary values.
Mm.
And she and I had the same values, and Adrienne mentioned which is most important, is people first.
Right.
But also we value working in community. We are, in a sense, solopreneurs, but we say banish the solo and solopreneurs. So Positive Delta, Adrienne's company, is independent. Diamond Mind is independent. All of it is interdependent. And we support one another in all three. And it's pretty clear I'm not going to go into a large global company and lead a change initiative. But I might have the discovery call and we might go at it together. And she's not going to teach a presentation skills to 8 people. So it's really about where do we want to go together?
Right.
And how can we use our strengths to make both of us contribute more? And we're learning every day how to do that more. It's really exciting.
It is, yeah, that is exciting. It's such a, I mean, well, I heard two things. One, I loved that you said that you met each other at a networking event. And I want to say that loosely because the importance of networking, especially in today's digital space, is still as relevant. It's just different avenues and channels. And this is the product of really going out there and meeting peer groups and networking is potential opportunities that you never even fathomed or thought of before.
Never would have thought of it.
Yeah, right. So that's the great thing is you.
And I would modify. Oh, I'm sorry to interrupt you, Manal.
No, good, go.
I would modify it slightly. It wasn't a networking event. It was a networking community. And then put a little plug. Adrienne and I are putting together a networking strategy guide because many people think of networking as an event rather than a process.
Right.
And I joined that because I knew I needed like-hearted people and more exposure to ideas. And I like the community base, and that community no longer exists, but the people that I met in it are still with me. So that was a great decision on my part to join that group.
I love that. I love that. At Founder and Force Multiplier, we also are building a community because I feel like, especially in the pandemic, it really amplified, and you guys said it really well, we sort of forget the human side of things. And we naturally gravitate towards individuals and people and communities and the motivation. Like that is important. And it doesn't always have to be a specific way or in a specific setting. It could be as small as joining a leadership book club, right? And really connecting at a different level. The other thing I really loved is when you guys said you met each other, you also didn't know what you were going to do, but you just knew that there was something there. And I think that's maybe hone in on that a little bit, because a lot of times, and it is very human nature, and I'm sure you guys dealing with, the human side of our emotions, have met a lot of individuals who feel like they need to have like a perfect plan, a business plan put together, projections, cash flows, do I have a prototype, et cetera, et cetera. But what ends up happening is you over-engineer so much that you never really take the first step, or it's too late, or you've lost sort of that mojo and the rev to do so because now you're overwhelmed and frustrated. So kind of share how that would help others and your experience.
Should I start?
You start, Adrienne.
Well, I would kind of poke fun at us that Tom and I together, especially together, probably separately, but especially together, we are not great at carrying through on plans. So that just worked out to our advantage. We're like, hey, yeah, we want to stay in touch. We should do something. Well, what should we do? I don't know. And so we just kicked around ideas, and we took an idea and we went with it. We thought, well, that worked well. Let's keep doing that. And it took us a while of doing that to realize, hey, we need somebody to kind of help us with our wild ideas and turn those into plans.
Awesome.
And then execute on those plans, right? To create some structure for us that we are not naturally wired to do, which all of my clients would say, really, that's funny because Adrienne is the one that shows up, with the plan.
Right.
But when I'm doing that for myself, not as good at it, right? So Tom and I together would just get so excited, and we'd have these ideas, and we would start something and then abandon it, and then start the next thing and abandon it. And so we had to find what now we call our Force Multiplier.
Oh, we love to hear that.
Right? Who took us, and she is the most patient, Katya is her name. She is the most patient individual I think I may have ever met, because she will listen to Tom and I and then come back and say, okay, so what I heard out of that is you want to do A. To do A, we need B, C, and D. What's your timing on that? Here's how we go. Let me come back and create a plan for you, and then let me drive you towards that plan. Right, Tom? I mean, like Katya does it. And she'll say, well, wait, don't go down that rabbit hole yet. I have a note. We'll sequence that later. Let's keep going here.
I love it.
She's patient, as Adrienne mentioned, but only to a certain point. And she would never say something like this. So this is my tongue in cheek. But Tom, a story doesn't fit in this box. It's a yes and no, a due date, because I always go to a story which has its place. And so knowing when to pull in the reins, knowing when we need structure, and having you teach us the terminology for that has helped us work better. We were already multiplying force, but we didn't really have the framework for that.
Yeah, that's amazing
And
to hear.
if I may add one small encouragement, if you get a sense you're supposed to work with someone, start really small.
Right. Good.
And
That's
test it.
such a good point.
No legal documents, any of that stuff. We both have families and businesses. We don't need extra hassles. And before the proposal we put in together, she had a thing she was working on, proposal she was working on, and she just needed a sounding board, someone to listen who had no skin in the game. And I love doing that. And I needed some help with something that was a way to, how does this design look? She has very good design sensibility.
Oh,
And
wow.
so a 10-minute conversation got me unstuck. But what it does is it deepens the desire. You still don't know how you're going to work together. But it's like, Tom could use help with this. Yeah, I'd like to talk to you. 20 minutes on the calendar. And you do this a few times. And if it turns out that it's not so much, nobody loses, then you have another person in your network. But what happened with us is we kept going, well, maybe we could this, maybe we could do that. And so there's always something you can do right where you are with what you have. Begin there.
Yeah, oh my God, thank you so much. I love that. And I actually, myself last year, I needed to hear that myself also. When I was actually about to come on here and record, I took a little video and I just posted it on Instagram, but I was like, a year ago, I literally do not see myself here. I don't.
Yeah.
And that's because I was just in a very different world. I was in my corporate world. I was strategy, finance, and boom, 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 working 90 hours a week and making it happen, shaking and baking, there's no time for anything. And just like you said, Tom, when you see that there's opportunity, when you see that there's a potential to do more, just start. I didn't start big either. Like, just start. I didn't realize putting a podcast together, which you guys have a podcast, all you need is a phone. You can literally start with your phone if you have nothing else. And your iPhone camera is probably better than any laptop camera out there or your Android, for all the Android lovers out there. And I love that you said that. And I hope everybody hearing today, if they have something that they think they want to do, or if they are stuck, or they're in constant, I have all these ideas, but I don't know how to put them together. The ROI of bringing a force multiplier and putting the structure, the guardrails, the showing the ultimate North Star, the vision of where you want to get and how to get there, frees you up as leaders to be impactful and actually execute and create, which if you spent many years doing it without a force multiplier, you probably wouldn't be here today. And so these are important lessons, right?
I would like to piggyback off of that and the example that Adam has, where he's able to do several businesses. Adrienne and I could have good conversations for the next 10 years, and they would be good and it would be valuable, but we couldn't get to a next level. So you start where you are. If you want to get to a next level, then you need additional support. And that's what happened with it. So if we had just had conversations periodically, that would have been valuable, but it wouldn't have been a community of conversation.
Right.
So you have to learn that.
I love that. Thank you for sharing that. So this is such an interesting journey. So you got two paths. Now these paths have created sort of a heightened a leadership beyond. You had great ideas and you acted on them, but it was hard without having sort of a core structure, which you found in your force multiplier. So now, that you've started your business, you've taken the leap, you guys are making impacts out there. I'm just curious, we, in our secondary education, we're not really taught mental fitness and how to deal with life. So then that translates to being an adult. And when you're an adult, now you're in this work mode and family mode, and you have no time to really teach yourself how to be a human and deal with change and conflict and better yourself and evolve. And you know, you guys come in, and now you're sort of experts in this. What are some of the things you're seeing out there that people can do to better themselves? And then two, how is it that your program specifically helps mold many years of really not having that sort of structure and practice? Like, we don't even have, maybe in our MBA we touch on it a little bit now, there's like emotional intelligence and so forth, but you're really still not taught that mental fitness and rigor and openness and acceptance of criticism and feedback and all the things that make great companies and businesses and leaders. Sorry, that was a little bit of a mouthful.
There's a few questions in there.
Yeah.
Adrienne, do you want to jump on part of it, or should I begin this time, or what would you like to do?
Yeah, I can start. I think, what comes to my mind is that, the advice that we give a lot is just to pause. It's so simple, and it's the thing that we often forget because now we're running, and especially as adults, we have so many more commitments now, and they're all important to us. And so how do we make sure that we are caring for ourselves so that we can care for our others, right? And our others being our people and our businesses and the companies that we work for or the businesses we're building. And so, a big part of a Leadership Beyond is, and I get this personally by being part of a Leadership Beyond and hosting this is that we are reminded to do that, to just stop once in a while. And there have been many times where I've been in a deep swirl with a client, and I'll happen to be talking to Tom, and like, well, did you breathe? Oh.
Yeah. So my job is to remind her of that because it works and she forgets. And her job is to remind me of the things I mean and forget. I think that's so powerful. Is every coach I know has a version of, if I would just, I would never be as hard on any of my clients as I'm being on myself. And if I would just practice what it is I suggest to others. And it's not because you're a hypocrite. It's just because we're pulled in this river of reactivity and we need one another. And so take care of yourself, I would agree. And then a version of take care of each other, which is, I guess you could call it empathy. But I'm very mindful. When I first started working with Adrienne, my kids are grown, but she had 2 children, grade school children at home. And she didn't know day to day. And then her husband working at home. And many of the listeners know exactly what I'm talking about, so I don't have to go in more there. But it was crazy. And she wanted to have space for what we do. But I had to pay attention because the space is moving and it needs to move. And so when I'm at my best, I'm seeing her feel out of control. And I'm taking my foot off the gas because I want it to sustain. I don't want to push now and have her to say, I can't mess with this.
Right.
And so good attention to your partner's experience is good. And then good communication, because even though I meant to do that, one time I might go, well, Adrienne, what are we going to do about the glockenspiel and the doodle hammer, And I didn't even notice it. But there's enough trust there that she's not going to say, forget it. She's going to say, right now, I can't think of the glockenspiel or the doodle hammer. And then I go, oh, I get it. And so we need.
And now I usually just give him a look. Yeah. And he doesn't even need words. Now I'm just like,
Adrienne, that's
he's like, forget it. Yeah.
Oh, she's got all kinds of moving along time and all those things. But it comes back to trust and respect and then humility, because my intention is to always honor what's important to her. And that intention is as sincere as can be. But I get caught up in my own river and miss signals. So it's just about come back to the center, which is the center is we've been gifted the opportunity to work together, and it is a gift. And sometimes it feels like a gift and sometimes not so much. And we have to pause and breathe, remember who we are and why we're here, and then just use a clean 4-letter word, NEXT.
Yeah.
And then just let go of whatever that is. The
Thank
next
you,
step is.
Yeah, exactly. So you bring such a good point there, because one, it's really that expectations and reality. I feel like a lot of times we expect, right? I have a home office and from X time and I'm block tasking and I'm going to get all this done.
Mhm.
But you just pointed a really good sort of explanation of Adrienne's scenario in her household. And people have different scenarios and situations, but there's a lot of variability. So so having that spatial, I guess maybe that conscious awareness of the reality that you're in, and then how to work around that reality, I feel is what made you successful. And can you talk about that a little? Because I think that's what creates giving up, anxiety, I can't do this, frustration, right? Because you're expecting a certain work day, right? And then things happen. I mean, things happen at home, especially when everybody's home in this new environment. It is challenging. Like you hear a lot of people saying, oh, I love working from home because I can get X, Y, and Z done. But there's another side to it that is very hard. There's very little compartmentalization. It's very hard leaving, and in this example, mom, Adrienne, stuff at home and leaving to an office where I've switched my brain to work mode, Adrienne. And so I feel like maybe that conscious awareness of reality is what you're explaining and really helped you guys build on this partnership.
Well, I'm going to start there and just very briefly say, Adrienne is much better at setting boundaries and putting up guardrails than I am. So I learned from her.
That's
and,
awesome.
and, not perfect, but much better at that. And so she'd be the right one to address that. I happen to know that it took her a long time to ask her clients for what she needed, and so through a lot of pain she got there. But I just have to say, Adrienne is really good at that. So take it away and tell us your secret sauce.
I mean, some of it comes out of necessity, right? Because when you feel like every moment is reserved for something, there isn't that allowance of variability naturally, right? So it feels like it has to be rigorous, sort of. It's tough for me to explain it because I feel like, my kids go to school. That's my pocket of time. It's only 6 hours. Right? That's my pocket of time, my secured pocket of time when I can get business done, right? Without interruption, very focused business done. My husband gets frustrated because I am so focused in those 6 hours. He's like, the house could be burning down around you and you'll still be typing away. And I'm like, well, right. I'm like, that's a good thing, right? This is good quality to have. I'm very focused. Conversely, when I'm not in those 6 hours, I'm focused at home.
Right.
And so all the stuff that's going on my computer is put away.
Right.
Because it has to be put away. Right.
Right.
Now, that's not perfect. It all blends together. That's not to say I'm not on my phone when my kids are in front of me. I'm not answering an email while I'm cooking dinner. Of course, all those things are still happening, right? And the wheels are still turning. The work wheels are still turning while I'm doing homework with my second grader. But the experience that I have had when those boundaries got very blurry was so hard that I had to make it just a hard rule. But I had to find what worked for me, which isn't going to work for everybody. It's not going to work for the next person. It might not even work for the next client. This is what worked for me. I carved out Wednesdays. We're here on a Wednesday, right? Wednesdays are for this. No clients on Wednesday. That works right now.
Right.
But it might not work in January.
Right.
And we'll have to flex and figure it out again, right? So what are the new boundaries? So there's a rigor, but there's a flexibility.
Right.
And so to sum that up, because I've seen it in action, she's very good at expressing the boundaries and the guardrails, but also agile occasionally when we need to be. And that helps me know what to ask her and what not to ask her. So she does a really good job communicating so that I can get quality time with Adrienne without interfering too much occasionally to her quality time with her clients and her kids and her husband. And she just communicates it really well. So I appreciate it.
And I think that's the key is knowing what you need and being able to communicate that in a way that is effective with those you're sharing it with, right? And that goes true, like, I don't know, in an hour, some child is going to walk in here and, well, I'm not going to just slam the door on her face, right? No, of course you say hello. And also, I'm not done with my workday yet, right? So I'll get to you in 20 minutes, 30 minutes, get your snack, go have start on your homework, whatever the thing is that she needs to be doing. But it's those boundaries and it's communicating that boundary, right? Like, we're doing a recording, don't open the door.
Yeah.
And I call that quality graceful assertiveness. And in my opinion, that's one of the most important quality for professionals to work on. Be kind and graceful, and she always is, but be assertive. Say what you need, ask for what you want. And Adrienne embodies both of those qualities.
That's amazing. And this is specifically a scenario of Adrienne being a mother at home and working from home. But this can apply across multiple roles in different companies as your force multiplier, right? Like open communication, setting boundaries, because we've all kind of been there. And I'm not perfect. I will tell you right now, Adrienne, girl, I need some advice. But like, we've all been there in roles because, some of us who are a little maybe ambitious and overachievers, we always say yes. That is the downside. And then you're in the situation where you're like, oh my God, why did I say yes? Why did I say I could get it done today? Why are these words coming out of my mouth? Because I am subconsciously looking at myself saying, don't do that. Don't do that. And now you
can't work that in.
Yeah. So how would you translate that, Tom or Adrienne, to the work environment and why communication and boundaries are important in building, really strong teams?
Mm-hmm. Well, it reminds me when I did work in an office and, people were around you, of course, right? And you'd get the drop-bys, and you still need that effective communication of when you're laser focused on something, you're in an open environment where you can't close an office door and somebody comes to ask you a question, you have to find a respectful way to say, does this need to be answered right now? Or can I get back to you? I'm very focused. Or do you put a sign up, somewhere in your space, almost like an on-air sign. I think about, you're on air, right? You're not really on air, but focus time. That's something that I use. I used to put my headset in when I worked in an office, and that tended to cue people that I didn't want to be bothered. I was working on a thing, and if I had my headset out, then sure, happy to chat, right? I love to chat. Like, yep, let's go grab a coffee, let's this, but not if I was in that focus mode. Let me plow through what I'm doing. So,
and the thing I would add to that is understand that people aren't wired the same way. And their drivers and needs are different. So, for example, I work well with introverted people when I know that they're introverted. I talk to think, and they need time to think about it. Right. And it's important for me to say, I wanted this question. I want your input. Give it some thought and we'll come back. That doesn't happen automatically to me because it doesn't matter to me if the talking gets us thinking, and I do it all in one sitting. But the better I understand how you are wired, and Adrienne and I are both predictive index partners, and that helps us to say what might be driving this. If you think of a buoy that's on top of the water, we can all see it bob. But until we know what it's anchored to, those drives, it doesn't really tell us what's going on. And that's how passive aggressive happens. There are people who are wired to smile and say yes. And then all of a sudden one day they go, I'm not going to take it anymore. You didn't even see this buildup because it was all under the surface. Because they
And your
want to be
intention is
nice.
usually good, right? But it's
Yeah,
just you
right.
put yourself in a situation where you're human. We're human sometimes.
And
It
then the
happens.
other thing I tell the people pleasers is if you smile and say yes, where should I go whenever I have something that needs to be done? Don't you want to go to the person that smiles and say yes? So they're bringing it on. It's not like they have a
Yeah.
kick me sign. So we tell the truth about what it is. We understand our differences, and you get better at asking for what you need, and I get better at flexing to what you need. And it's
Right.
not perfect. Sometimes I step on your toes, but if you know that someone's working to work better with you, you really can overlook those things. And I go,
Yeah.
whoops, and then I get a chance to try again.
I love that, Tom. I love the really having that transformational mindset to understand and just being aware again that there are different, people go through different journeys. They're going through, they're in a different part in their career. They deal with situations differently, and having that heightened sense of consciousness and really getting to know your surrounding and your teams and how people are motivated or how they accept change, or how much information they're needing, or the importance of the why behind certain changes or initiatives. Like, these are very core leadership skills, but they're also very easily missed. And I really appreciate that you said that.
They're very much overlooked, and it costs effort on the front end and pays dividends in the long term in both relationship and result.
I love that. Thank you, Tom. So our conversation, we could talk for hours. This is so wonderful. In these times, we're continuously challenged with, I would say, a lot of macro changes that are happening in our industries, environments, and then also, I would say, generational changes happening, right, that are very drastically polar opposite. How does a leadership beyond, and what advice do you have or closing for people listening in, and how they could potentially maybe even leverage your services? Because a lot of people are facing a lot of challenges today, especially in business. There's so much change. I mean, the shift from retail and how to still maintain, like top, retail spots, and, workplace changes and recession and continuous scare of the pandemic and, political setting. And the list goes on. Like, we are in a
The list
special
is long.
time.
Well, I can start. I would say it's get to know yourself and get to know your people, and then get to know everybody together with the work that you're setting out to do, right, in a business setting. And doing that, that is something that Tom and I both offer with, he mentioned it, predictive index. And so this is, it's a platform, right? So it goes where you need it to go, and it helps provide insights to the things that matter most to you at that time. And it can, when it's different, then you go back and you get more insights. But it always begins with that self-awareness, and then the individuals on your team, but then also how you're working together as a team to accomplish your goals. Tom, what would you add?
Well, I think that's key. The other, if I may quote Adrienne, so she reminds us to breathe, but she said something off the cuff that has become a truth statement for me. And as I heard your list, Manal, I thought of her quote again. May I quote you, Adrienne?
Of course.
She said
I hope.
yeah, she said this. She said, everybody's experiencing the same thing, and we experience it differently. So that long list that you just had hits 100% of your listeners, but it means something totally different.
Right.
So I would say, and Adrienne and I do have a process, which she mentioned, but even if you're not going to use this process, what I keep hearing is it's challenging for leaders to make space for thinking beyond where you are. The word lead means to go beyond. And everybody's plate is full. There's nowhere on their day timer that says, think beyond where you are unless you put it there. And CEO Think Time has shown up in all of my coaching clients because these are naturally strategic people, but strategy goes out the window. And what the platform that Adrienne mentioned is speed to value. It's not like they couldn't learn these things, but very quickly you can see all the moving parts and how they relate. So they have to make less space to think beyond where they are. But we only have people in our community who want to go be a better version of themselves and create with the people they care about, their team, their organization, their families, an environment that's better than the current environment. To do that, we have to go before in the heart and the head, and don't do it alone. Lean on your network because you might be able to do it alone, but what fun is there in that?
Yeah, exactly. That's great. Thank you, Tom. That's so inspirational. So if somebody is interested in really having this program, what is sort of the first step? Like, how do they find you? Where do they go?
Yeah, our website is aleadershipbeyond.com. Our email is connect@aleadershipbeyond.com, and that will get you to both me and Tom, and we can take it from there.
That's awesome. So tell me something before we part. So we now know about your professional journey. We understand your passions and why you do this, how you got to a leadership beyond. Tom, what's something people are usually surprised to find out about you? You're smiling.
I'm smiling.
I don't know what he's going to say.
knowing how I'm wired, 64,850 things come to mind, and you have me choose one, which puts me in enormous stress and anxiety. You may not be able to see it, but I'm sweating and nearly dying to think of one thing that surprises. So I'm going to defer, and I'm going to say, Adrienne, what was one thing that surprised you about me early on?
Ooh, you're secretly an introvert. No, I'm kidding. That's not true at all. Ooh, I think one thing that was not immediate when we met was how much you are very much focused at a big scale, but you talk about how you're focused at the individual level, but your thinking, it still goes big scale.
I love it.
I love it too.
So I get to turn that question around to Tom then, right?
Manal will ask you the question. It's only fair. Are you turning it back to me, Manal?
Yeah. Fair play. Fair play.
Make sure. The thing that continues to surprise me is how well Adrienne, and I shouldn't be surprised, but it still wows me. I noticed early on she had a design sensibility, which I didn't know about, but it doesn't surprise me anymore because I do know it. So she surprises me all the time. But how she is a visual thinker, and she can articulate a vision in the way that I can see it. And it still surprises me. She was on a panel discussion last week, and I shouldn't be surprised. I should expect it. I remember thinking, I get the picture.
That's awesome.
And she didn't draw anything. It was using words. Yeah. And I just marvel at that skill. It does surprise me, even though I know it. I can see what she wants me to see. And I don't know how she does it.
Oh, that's amazing. That's her superpower.
Technical writing training, I think. That's a plug for a technical writing degree, and then go be an instructional designer for years.
I didn't even know that was a thing, until she surprised me with it.
Right. We learn something about each other all the time. Like it's always interesting to see what you learn about people and, how you connect on different levels, and how I think the biggest lesson here is how you observe and learn from others, and then apply that to your own maybe natural ways and be like, well, what if I change the way I thought about this particular decision-making process, or if I reacted differently? And I also love your feedback on, slow down, take a breath. I know I've I've received that quite a bit. I mean, I was a little more, energetic and fiery when I was younger and starting in my career, believe it or not. And I had a really good coach to ask me one time, what is your silence? And it has the same, yes, I know.
It's a good way to ask that.
And I love that. Well, thank you so much for coming on to the podcast today, really being part of the family and, telling everybody your story, really inspiring those out there. And I know this is going to reach many people, and the impact that you guys can have as a company on other firms and individuals during these turbulent times is massive. And we appreciate you. And I know people will be reaching out because this is such an important part, an integral part of our change that's happening in society today.
Well, thank you so much for having us.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much for tuning into our podcast. If you love the show, please leave us a review. It really helps us get the podcast out to the leaders and force multipliers who need it. As you know, we love to share in experiences and grow together. If you are interested in coming on to our podcast or have a guest referral, please email us at info@founderandforcemultiplier.com, and all the information to reach us is linked below in the show notes. Thank you again, and see you next week.